All right, we are live.
Hey,
Hello, hello.
We don't have our music, right?
no music.
Okay.
We'll just count on Jeremiah's beautiful voice.
I got the money and the power.
There you go. All right, that's it.
On this week's episode,
I forgot to pull up the show notes.
Super.
I was gonna do it. I'm gonna do it live. All right. Welcome to episode 25 of Money and Power, our weekly look at questions related to finance, politics, and culture. I'm your host, Nathan Martin, and joining me from Michigan, a financial consultant and host of the Rob Talks Money and Apologetics 105 podcast, Rob Johnson.
Hey,
And joining me in the studio here in the crown jewel of rural Ohio, a Experian credit sham consultant, Jeremiah Martin.
present.
I actually remembered your name this time. Together, we are the trio of talk, the triad of the tittle tattle, and the triumvirate of the tete-a-tete. How are you guys doing?
Oh man, just glad to just be present and be on Facebook Live. It took a while, but we are here.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but Facebook Live hates us. And every time it's like this. So,
yep.
Well, it's the social media giants cracking down on our conservative conspiracy theories.
Yeah, we're one false pharmaceutical away from getting booted. Looking at you, Alex.
yeah.
Looking at you.
All right. So we have some cool stuff on the docket. Our Facebook Lives tend to be a little bit shorter episodes. And we are going to be talking about credit scores, and various other sundry financial topics. But first, it is our time to look back at the weird, the inane, and the general happenings going on in the world by the crazy people who happen to live here. News bits.
I mean, we have the guy who does the jingle.
I know, I was pointing to him. He's like,
Oh,
no.
I thought you were kicking it to me for a news bit, and I was trying to signal. No, go to Rob first. Sorry, rewind. News bits. Show us your bits of news.
All right, Rob.
All right, so non-financial topic. So I'm just getting my notes here. So about 2 days ago, there was a breaking story in technology, and what happened was this dude who runs the Unbox Therapy website. His name is Louis Hilsenberger. He was the guy who broke Bendgate back for the iPhone 6, back when it was all, the iPhone 6 Plus was all bendy. So he was getting
Quote
some
unquote
complaints.
Bendgate.
No, it was really Bendgate. They sucked. That's why they didn't have that problem with the 6S. They fixed it. So what happened was he was getting a lot of complaints about the new iPhone XS and XS Max, that when they were idle and the lightning connector plugs in, they don't charge. So he had 10 of them on his YouTube channel, and did a test on them, and the majority of them did not work. They did not charge when they were idle and the lightning cables plugged in. They only charge with wireless charging. And some of them, when you plug them in, wouldn't even turn on when the lightning cable was plugged in. So seems like a software issue, hopefully. If not, then it's going to be a bigger deal than when those Samsung Notes used to blow up in people's pockets. So we'll see. But yeah, this might be another bump in the road for Apple.
I mean, for the record, a phone not charging won't keep me from getting on an airplane. So I don't think it's exactly
And also
analogous,
won't have every airport in the United States say, hey, if you have this device,
right.
if you have this particular Samsung, did we mention that Samsung will blow up on the plane?
Let me ask you this.
Just to be clear to everyone in this terminal that's waiting on their flight.
Yeah.
If you have a Samsung, it might blow up.
He's
Well,
not
let me ask
he's
you
not
this.
exaggerating.
Did those Samsung devices charge? Did they charge? Mic drop.
Before or after they blew up?
Doesn't matter.
So what? So clarifying question. What device or devices was this on?
It seems like it's primarily the 10s Max, but he tested some 10s's, and it happened on those as well. And he also had a iPhone 10 previous gen, and it didn't do it on that. But granted, he only had one in his study, so that's not very good. There's been like over 1,000 claims of this just on that feed.
All right. Well, there you go.
Interesting.
There's
Time to
the
bring
news.
back the Amazon phone.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Windows phone coming your way 2019.
Josh Armstrong said he has a Samsung, and quickly, Josh, it might blow up. Get rid of it.
Yeah, it probably will. It's from Korea.
Very possible.
I just like how this is coming immediately after our episode where we appeared as if we were 3 Apple fanboys.
Speak for yourself. I gave 2 Google devices in my Mount Rushmore.
Oh yeah, by the way, I have some complaints about that. Okay, I got ridiculed for my microwave, and you guys chose a freaking Apple TV, which you don't carry around with yourself, a Google Home, which you don't just carry around with yourself, and a Amazon Alexa. But you know what? Sure, my microwave that was at the forefront of technology.
It's an appliance. It's been like, what's really great? My dishwasher. That's a fine piece of technology, said no one.
I do. I compliment my daughters frequently.
At least he said daughters.
Oh yeah, my wife's not doing dishes. It's either like that's my chore. It's always been my chore, so now I've been able to pass that off to my kids.
Good work.
I'll be very upfront with that fact. All right, Jeremiah.
All right, so this bit of news is actually coming from Michigan State University, and it has nothing to do with football. So Rob, sorry about that. But the headline is Democrat/Republican divide is worst it's ever been. This in one of the first studies to address polarization, not only in terms of who works together but also who doesn't. This study from Michigan State University finds that party polarization is even worse than most people think. Neil analyzed publicly available data on who sponsors bills in Congress from 1973 to 2016. He specifically looked at how often politicians from both sides of the aisle co-sponsor legislation. He says, while it's hard to imagine incivility among Democrats and Republicans getting worse, it likely will, Neil said, especially if one party barely holds the majority. He uses the Affordable Care Act as an example. The Democrats held a slim majority, just enough to get the bill passed. Then the Republicans took control, again with a slim majority, and tried to repeal it. So what's the solution? It could be selecting more centrists to Congress, he says, but that'll be tough because centrists often don't appeal to American voters, who are increasingly polarized as well. So, I mean, what do you guys think? It goes on, but it doesn't seem like it brings up too much that we don't already know.
Yeah, I don't get it myself. Probably like 30 to 40% of my Apple News app is people writing about how there's this strong political divide, and it's quote unquote worse than it's ever been before. I don't know if people just kind of forgot the 50s and 60s, but apparently being on different sides of what judge we put on the Supreme Court is far more significant than the divide caused by the civil rights movement. So that's cool. I don't get it. I think everyone needs to settle down. I wrote earlier to someone, I said, look, we don't have really a big problem with people on the hard left or the hard right. Really, that exists and it's exacerbated by social media. We have a problem with getting online and being a little bit tougher than we normally are. But like when I'm out in public and I'm floating around and talking to people, this is not even a hot issue. Granted, that's anecdotal, but I don't see it as this terrible divide that we have.
Well, yeah, no, I agree, and I mean the other piece of this is if you're going to look at bills co-sponsored over time and the difference between Democrats and Republicans and how many bills they can agree on, I think ultimately that comes to how many bills are being passed and ultimately what the government what role we have given the government over time, which has significantly changed and significantly increased. In fact, another piece of news that people talk about a lot is how little Congress is getting done. But it's they're still regularly passing bills, but are they doing what my political viewpoint says that they should be doing, and that's going to lead to this level of quote unquote polarization too. That okay, there's not enough pro-life bills being passed, or there's too many bills that infringe on Second Amendments or whatever it is. So that's going to add to the polarization that it's not that bills aren't being passed. I think that they're being passed in a historic fashion related to the growth of our government. But yeah, really interesting. Nathan?
I think that there's a certain demographic of people that make a lot of money by ensuring that we are quote unquote miles apart on policy, when in fact we really aren't miles apart on policy. Very few. So, regardless of the issue, I think you'd be hard pressed to find where we are so miles apart on policy. Like even let's look at the abortion issue, right? So, abortion advocates will look at the same polling and they'll say, "Oh, most people are pro-choice," and pro-life people will look at the same polling and they'll say, "Oh, most Americans are pro-life," and it's just based off of questions about what exceptions to abortion you want, right? So are most Americans for abortion on demand? And the answer is no. Most Americans are not for abortion on demand. Are most Americans for no exceptions to abortion? And the answer is no. So right, so those are the two kind of opposites. But when you look at policy, most Americans would be perfectly fine with states deciding abortion, and whether they understand that's what would happen if Roe v. Wade were overturned.
Right.
Like they think one outcome to Roe v. Wade being overturned, but in actuality it'd be a completely different one. So, when you look at issue by issue, I've always said that when you knock on your neighbor's doors and you start talking about policy, like I have being on city council, then that's when you start really getting to the meat and potatoes and understanding it.
Yep, that's a good point.
All right. So
that's it. So you guys have a good week.
All right. My news bit, Dateline, Colorado. And this kind of ties into a throwback.
More weed.
Stealing oregano from a marijuana dispensary is a dopey thing to do. But that's exactly what a group of Colorado thieves allegedly did early Wednesday after crashing a stolen minivan through the glass front entrance of Native Roots, a Colorado Springs pot shop. After the break-in with the van, several accomplices entered the store from a different vehicle, carried out what they probably assumed were containers of marijuana, but they were actually just a bunch of oregano. So they just got some spicy stuff when they smoked it. So, yeah. I mean, what can you say?
Well, first of all, these kids got some gumption and moxie. I like the hustle. I think that had they been using alcohol, it would have been far worse. People probably would have died. So,
Of course you do. Because when's the last time that someone broke into a distillery and got Mountain Dew?
well, as long as Bush Light is still like $4 for a 30 pack, that's probably not going to happen. They kind of priced those incidents out of the market.
Accurate.
Just economics.
Yes. Fine. So Gene asked, how many keyboards do I have? And I have a few.
Too many.
I have, this is my iMac keyboard, and this is my work computer keyboard, which is a Dell. And then this is my laptop. So I just have a lot of keyboards. Pay no attention to the mess on there. I'm just going to put it on Jeremiah's face for the entire. There you go. There you go. You
This
guys
is-
get Jeremiah's face.
For our podcast listeners, this is going to be thrilling audio.
Go
Yes.
back and listen. If you are listening to this on the podcast and you're like, what in the heck is going on? You can go to moneypowerpod.com/group and join the group, and or go onto our Facebook page and see the Facebook Live and all the hilarity that has ensued in us trying to figure out how to do Facebook Live on the fly.
Yeah. There you go. One other comment from the Facebook Live feed. Josh Armstrong says Rob is drinking Nestle water and not Strikeforce Energy. To which I replied, when you mix in Strikeforce Energy, it is a clear liquid, so there is
Right.
absolutely no way of knowing whether he's
First of all-
drinking Nestle or Strikeforce. So set the record straight for us, Rob.
Get that in the camera there, Nathan.
There you
Look at that. That is Costco brand one, and Nestle. They pump water out of the Great Lakes and waste. This is Costco water. It's far superior. And there is 2 pumps of Strikeforce Energy in that. And while we're on the subject, I was in Iowa this weekend, and I went to this men's ministry. And one of the guys showed up, and he had this 40-count box of Strikeforce. And I said, "Hey, how'd you hear about that? You must listen to Money and Power." He's like, "Nope, never heard of it." He heard it from I forget the guy's name, the Lone Survivor film. That
Marcus Luttrell.
Thank you. His podcast, Strikeforce, sponsors that as well. But I've often heard that Marcus Luttrell types in our offer code instead of their own. So there's that. That's a rumor.
That's awesome. So,
yeah.
does he use a promo code, or does he just pay full price?
He's a member. But I gave him our offer code. I plugged the show. I was shameless as always. So it worked out well.
Hey, where would we be without shameless plugs? So, yes, we are brought to you by Strikeforce Energy, as always. StrikeforceEnergy.com. You can use our discount code MAP for 20% off. It's a very good deal. And I think that's the earliest we've ever done a plug, but it just seemed fitting to just get that done and out of the way. We'll plug it later. We just love this stuff. We'll plug it all throughout the show.
So on that note, we've actually already mentioned our Facebook group as well as our sponsor, Strikeforce Energy. Earlier this week, I was just randomly feeling generous, and I posted in the group that the first person to comment, I'd send them a sample pack of Strikeforce Energy, and Kevin Small answered the call, and so I sent him a sample pack. So I am going to make another offer. That the first new person to join the Facebook group, either during this live podcast or after the fact listening to the podcast. There's no end date on this. Just the first new person to join the Facebook group at moneypowerpod.com/group and mention there that they heard the call here. I will also send them a sample pack of Strikeforce Energy. So it's good stuff, and we want to spread the cheer.
You know what? I'll add on to that. The second person who comments, I'll send him a bottle of Kirkland Signature water so they can use it. I'm being legit. So second person, you can get the water, and then do what you want with it.
So the first
free.
person has to supply their own water. The second person has to supply their own strike force. But
Correct.
it all works out in the end.
Yep.
That's why you have a spouse.
Oh.
We are all complementarians on this podcast.
Complement each other.
That's right.
Except for me.
Oh, that's a good. It's a good conversation for another time. Speaking of which, Nathan, what is our topic of the day?
All right. So our topic of the day today, we're going to be talking about money and finance, and really wanted to delve deep into credit reporting. So I'm going to put Rob's face front and center, and Rob is going to talk about credit scores and credit reporting, and then we got some finance questions. So
Yeah. So credit scores. Oh, come on, man.
I'm sorry. In the meantime, if anyone has any questions they would like us to address, drop it in the chat, and we will address it. We will address it after Rob.
Am I clear?
I think so.
I hope so.
All right.
Well, but
I'm going to chuck something at your face.
I'm about to Bill O'Reilly this show. You don't watch out. And if you don't get that reference, shoot me an offline message. All right. So credit scores came about in 1989. And basically, the Fair Isaac Corporation, that's how we get the name FICO, organized this system. And it's partially secretive, it's partially public. And basically what they felt was that lenders, and it eventually evolved into more than just lending organizations, needed to understand a person's standing with regard to their financial bravado, if you will. So how well someone does financially, they needed it summarized in one figure or what it is now 3 figures. So the Fair Isaac Corporation developed what they call the FICO score. And the FICO score is based on 4 factors. The first is payment history, and that accounts for about 35%. The second is how much you owe as far as your outstanding debt, and that counts for 30% of your score. 15% is your length of credit history, and 10% is the types of credit that are used. So the more diverse types of credit you have, the longer history you have, the less you owe, and a good payment history are ways that you can have a good score. And the range is 350, I think 850. I don't have that in front of me. And really good credit starts at about 720. So what's happened is that this score is used for many people to judge. It's used for mortgages, auto loans. That puts you in what tier of an interest rate that you're in both of those situations, and it tells even landlords how likely you are to make your payments. But what people have confused is that they've used credit scores in place of net worth, where if you have a high credit score, they equate that to being well off financially, and that's a misnomer. That's actually a very large myth. People who have 750 to 850 credit scores are more likely to have 6-figure debt. They just have higher limits, so the percentage of their debt owed compared to what their maximum credit limit is quite small, but they still have 6-figure debt, and they might have lower net worths on average. So your net worth and your credit score are 2 completely different things. You can have a 6-figure or a 7-figure net worth and no credit score at all, but on paper to a lender, you are going to be less likely to be given a loan as if you had a ton of debt and an 850 credit score. So it's kind of a backwards system, but what they do is they just play the majority. They play the field. So there are some people who are in the margins who might not get a loan. But honestly, the people who are doing well financially don't really need a loan. So it's a very small percentage of people that might not get the loan they need. I don't have a problem with people boosting up their credit scores. I know that some financial consultants do. It's not really a big deal. My thing is, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to accumulate a lot of debt and get a bigger credit score? Or are you trying to knock out your debt, keep your credit stable, and increase your net worth? And that second camp is generally where I lead people to. So, That's really it. It's not really a complicated system. It's a very frustrating one for some people. There's horror stories about the three different companies: TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian are the three companies. And they've had a long history of reporting the wrong thing on people's credit history, or if someone dies with the same name, they'll mark someone who didn't die as deceased. That's very common. Um, so these companies really do control someone's buying power, and they make a lot of mistakes. And there was that breach, I think it was Equifax, that had that data security breach on their servers, and it was a big mess. And to make matters worse, the URL that they that they made so people could solve it was hijacked and reversed by someone, and they got more information scammed off of that false URL. So they just couldn't win. But it was and that's an example of why I think there do need to be more regulations and checks and balances when it comes to people's credit, because the private market hasn't really done a terrific job of that. But that's a debate for a different time, I think.
Well, so my question related to that, you mentioned the data breach. One of the things for me, and I heard a lot of commentators on this as well, one of the things that was the most, or one of the things that made that data breach so egregious was the fact that these companies, there's no opt-in. You're automatically opted into a system that has all of this data on you, that when there's a data breach, there's nothing you can do about it. You know, if Target has a data breach, or, you know, Amazon has a data breach, you know, at the very least, you gave them the data that you gave them and you opted into that system. Same thing with Facebook or Twitter or any other company out there. I mean, with these three companies, you're automatically opted into a system that is, on the one hand, grading you and not always grading you correctly. But then you have these, you know, data breaches that, you know, really leave people vulnerable, and there's nothing that can be done. I mean, what can be done about this, Rob?
Well, you can not use credit ever. So the way that you opt in to this system is you go into debt, or you open up a credit card, or you have some line of cash that's in someone else's name. That's the best way to look at debt. So basically, you're borrowing money from someone else. They're giving you a limit. And once you do that, you enter into the contract where now you're going to be tracked by at least two of these companies. The more that you do it, the more likely you are to be picked up by the third. Sometimes I think TransUnion doesn't pick up everyone as well as Equifax and Experian does. But that's beside the point. So what happens if you get your stuff stolen? Really what you have to do is go through, and this is why I put so much emphasis on the first move of my financial plan, which is investigating your finances, of looking at every area of finance that your name is on, because that will help mitigate any problems that you have when your identity is stolen. For example, 2 years ago, my identity was stolen, and I went to go apply for a different auto insurance. And they said, well, your premium is going to be like $4,000 a year. And I said, well, that seems high for someone who's never had an accident like in the last 7 years. And they said, no, you've had like 6 in the last 2 years. I said, oh, where? And they said, Minnesota. I said, never been in Minnesota. And they said, well, you have to prove that. So I had to go through this law firm called, they're kind of like handle these type of things. They're called LexisNexis. Good name for you people to remember if this ever happens. And it's completely free, but it takes about 60 days. And the person I spoke with on the phone said about 5% of the people that call them initially actually follow through. So I was in that 5%, followed through, cleaned up my record, took about 3 months, reapplied for insurance, and it dropped by over 50%. So, wow. But that's the work that you have to put in if you want to get your record cleaned up if there is some type of breach or a stolen identity. The stolen identity insurance, it's up to you, but it's a free service that people provide on the open market, because usually they can use that to litigate the companies that did the data breach. So it's kind of a win-win for them, and it's free for you.
Nice. All right. So what other questions do we have?
So Josh, Nope, sorry. Gene Gosware in the comments says, if I come up with a nifty jingle for the next free credit reporting agency, does it help or harm my credit? Same question about my reputation.
I don't know. I have no idea. It would definitely damage your reputation, at least for me. Sorry, Gene.
Gene also says, can you explain how these three companies are clearly prophesied in Revelation to be a sign of the apocalypse?
Yeah. Yeah, it's right in there next to, the creation of America, right there in 3rd Corinthians. It's in there.
The Book of Mormon, right?
Well, he clearly says prophesied in Revelation, so it's obviously Revelation chapter 23. So
it's my favorite chapter.
It's a good one.
Kudos.
Hands down.
So Kevin Small commented on our post earlier today. I actually don't see him on the live, so miss you, Kevin. But we will answer your question anyway, and you can watch the video later or listen to the podcast as we know you do, and we appreciate that. But he says, I would love you guys to talk about the dangers of the "it's not your fault" advertising going on in the finance world. Are you $50,000 in debt? It's not your fault. It's the evil banks. Are you under a horrible timeshare agreement? It's not your fault. It's the tricky salesman. What do you guys think?
Rob?
Yeah. It's tough. It's kind of like anything else when we discuss politics or culture, there is a middle ground to be struck. It's definitely situational. I mean, there are people out there that run companies that are extremely shady. They hide their fees in the background. They're not upfront. The question I ask is, at what point is enough research enough, right? I shouldn't have to read all of Apple's terms and services to know they're not going to screw me over, right? I shouldn't have to read 58 pages of legal documentation to sign up for the new iOS 12. So at which point is enough research enough for the common person in the marketplace? So if a company says, we're going to loan you $500 and it's only going to be a upfront 10% fee, at what point do you get to where you're saying, well, now I'm on page 48 of the agreement, and now I see where that 700% APR fee comes into play? So yes, there's personal responsibility. And a lot of it starts from when you're young, like really young, 17, 18, getting hit up with credit cards and whatnot. But a lot of it does lie on the backs of businesses that are actively trying to screw people out of their money by doing false advertising, shifting LLCs, moving states. And that was a big problem with payday lenders. They would stay under the domain of Indian reservations or Indian tribes, and would move from state to state, so they couldn't be prosecuted at a state or at a state or federal level in some cases. So there are people that get screwed over, and wrongfully so, and it's not, I would say it's not really their fault. But then on the other side, there are people that need to own up to the responsibility and note that you took on this debt, and that's why bankruptcy for me is something I've never recommended to a client before. There is a perfect world where bankruptcy would probably work for somebody, but for me, like it's an integrity thing. You signed your name, you borrowed the money, so bankruptcy for me has always been a last option. So yeah, there's a demonstrable amount of personal responsibility in finance, but there's also a lot of corruption as well.
No, I think that brings, I think it brings around to kind of a general cultural awareness that, even in politics, we talk about, systems that drag people down. We talk about, even institutionalized racism, and different things that might drag people down. And that is not to say that there aren't issues that obviously not everyone starts off on the same foot in life. But there is a heavy emphasis on personal responsibility. All right, you've been dealt a bad hand. How do you move on from there? And that's easier for some compared to others. But in this case, yeah, I mean, there's obviously bad actors, and I think that's the thing that we need to be aware of. But in a general, broad strokes kind of argument, like we have to make sure that we're safeguarding ourselves. Even going back to the credit score stuff, are we ensuring that our finances are in line? Are we ensuring that we actually know what is on our reports, what is being said about us? Is that true? And just doing small things, even your move one is going to put people at a advantage to just about everyone else in the United States. So it's already going to put them, leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else.
As a good friend in Michigan once said, there are rules. There are rules.
Did you know that,
Indeed.
Rob? Did you know there are rules?
There are rules to this game.
I've heard a rumor that there are rules.
All right, Gene asked a great question. For reals, why are scores between three so different sometimes?
They shouldn't be. I mean, they really should be like maybe 30 points wide. I mean, if they are that far apart, then that's a red flag. That should tell you that somebody isn't reporting what they ought to be. So if you have that situation where the scores are so far apart, then I would definitely start to look into each report and see what they're reporting differently, because some of them might have a debt that's still on there that should have rolled off. And that's where you make a claim, and they'll drop that off pretty quickly.
All right, and then Josh Armstrong asks, how can we protect the credit scores of our kids? How can we know if their identity is stolen?
Why doesn't Jeremiah take that? My monitor in front of me just went out, so I can't see anything. So I'm hoping that I'm looking at the right thing. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Well, this is a perfect opportunity to introduce our latest sponsor, LifeLock.com. And if you go to LifeLock.com and enter the promo code, I'm just kidding. That would be awesome. That would have been an awesome segue. LifeLock, hey, hit us up. I've heard good things. I've never used it, but no, I mean,
Hey, I'm back.
That's a good question. I mean, this is kind of a blind spot on me. I mean, can we even look up our kids' credit reports? I mean, can we do the once a year free type thing for our kids?
All right. So what was the question? I'm sorry. This monitor really got me tripping. I'm just being real, guys. These things happen. So
how can we protect the credit scores of our kids? How can we know if their identity is stolen?
Yeah, you can look up your kid's credit score. Now, again, like I mentioned before, the way that they enter into that market is by opening up something that has to do with credit. So, for example, if you go and type in your kid's social security number and their details into TransUnion and it says no report, then there's no report on your kid, because that's tied to two things: social security number plus some type of credit transaction. So you can absolutely look them up. But how can you protect your kids? You can allow them or help them to not go into debt and to make the right move starting out. I mean, they might have something small up front, but like when I was 18, I was like looking at every student loan provider in the nation, hoping that they would like write me a check for like 50 grand, just cash up front. That's how stupid I was. And that resulted into me going into nearly 6 figures worth of student loan debt because I was so careless with how I ran my student loans. So it's a big thing that parents, if you're listening to this, that you are the advocate for your children when it comes to their financial life. So if their information gets stolen when they're 18, but they're really not in debt, that's a win. But if they're in a bunch of debt and their credit information gets stolen, then they're going to be worse off. So you can always clean up things that aren't true. But if they're 18 years old and they're, nearing 30, 40 grand in debt already before they're in their 20s, you have to start doing more work into advising them on how to run their financial life, because that's going to be the difference between them having breakthroughs in their 20s or their 30s.
So let me ask you a clarifying question then. So would it be possible for someone to have, a minor to have identity theft, but it not show up on their credit report as far as them not having any accounts open? Or would that be the main way that you would be able to tell? Pop in their social security number, and
Yeah.
if there's no accounts, then they're good. If there are
Correct.
accounts, then unless you're opening up credit cards in your 7-year-old's name, then they should be good.
Yep, and you can also have, if you have I have an independent insurance agent, and um, he can run numbers for your kids for your insurance score too. So you can type that in, and that won't report. That'll just do a system check. So you can check with your independent insurance agent and online with any of the major three bureaus, or I would check all three. And Congress actually did something pretty neat a few years back. They passed a bill that says everyone can go online and check their credit score from all three bureaus for free once a year. And we'll drop that link in the show notes, because I'm not exactly sure what the website is. It's like, I'm not even going to tell you what it is because I'll screw it up. But yeah, that's kind of a neat thing that they did. So that'll be in our show notes this week.
And so Andrew asks, how would your kid have a credit score if they're underage? And it's pretty easy because it doesn't really go by age. It goes by social security number. I know the answer to this. I'll just take it. And opening a credit account. So, for example, one of my daughters has a credit score because we were making payments on a hospital bill that was under her name. And so the hospital put that down as credit for her and reported it to the credit agency, and we made payments, we paid it off, and no big deal. But she has a credit report, which is going to be really weird when they look back and they're like, wow, you have credit history of like 30 years and you're like 31 or whatever it is.
But is that right? That can't be right. Like, that can't be how it should be.
No, you would file that's where you file a claim against that charge and try and get it moved off of there. The trouble is once she's in the system, she's in the system.
Yeah.
So the only thing that'll show is that she is a former credit user that has an unknown credit score.
Right. And that's why we just decided just to leave it as is, because it wasn't worth it. We just paid it off and it's fine.
All right.
Exactly.
So unless we get any other questions in the chat on Facebook Live, which, first of all, we really appreciate everyone who's joining us on Facebook Live this evening. We usually record a little bit later, but hey, we appreciate you joining us at this late hour. Unless we get any other questions, this can be kind of our final question. What apps or programs do you guys, and I'll answer this as well. What do we all use for budgeting?
I use an Excel sheet, and that's because I have not found a program that meets all my needs, and it's actually been really frustrating. I'm interested in your guys because I've tried pretty much everything.
What have you tried?
I've tried You Need a Budget. I've tried a couple of the other major ones. I can't remember off the top of my head. But they don't functionally work as well as I like. So I just use an Excel sheet and I figure out what all my stuff that's going out, all my stuff that's going in, what it should be, and then of course we do some cash envelopes. We do, make sure we have a debt snowball and some other stuff. We're not Ramsey disciples, but I've taken some of like little chunks here or there. And then also, some stuff, Robbie, you told me. So it's just, I've taken bits and pieces here, kind of incorporated it all, but like, it's just all in an Excel sheet. And then I track our debt, and then how much we've paid off in debt, month over month. And then I have it figured out by, which debt has the most interest rate, and we pay off lowest first, but then it kind of goes to the interest rate, if that makes sense. So that's
Okay.
kind of how I do it. But yes, I'm a geek, so I can do an Excel sheet, but I haven't found something that is able to draw stuff in from the bank account, not do a bunch of duplicates, as well as something that is shareable with my wife, that she could sneak peek on her phone all of our finances. I haven't found anything that's awesome.
I'm about to blow your mind.
Please do.
So when I wrote the second move for my plan, it's build a budget. I was very charitable when I wrote it because I noted 4 tools that people can use. But in my mind, I've been looking at budgets for probably 3-4 years. Every app that's come up, Hello Wallet, the Simple Budget, all these different startup apps. And really, there's only one app out there that I recommend to people, and that's EveryDollar. So EveryDollar is Dave Ramsey's budget tool. And the neat thing about it is you don't need to be in Dave Ramsey's system to use the app. So the basic level is free. And what's neat is there's Android and iOS apps. So like my wife has one on her phone, I have one on my phone. Our monthly budget is in there. And if you pay $100 a year, it'll sync to your bank account. So you can drag and drop everything over. If you don't, you put everything in manually, which isn't a big deal if you don't have a lot of transactions. I'll be honest, I like Intuit's products. I use QuickBooks for a lot of clients, and I use TurboTax when I do my own taxes at the end of the year. But their budgeting app sucks. It's called Mint, and it's really bad. It has no level of detail. And basically what it does is you import your checking account into it, and it just organizes everything, and it sucks really bad.
So the reason we're chuckling is that Josh Armstrong said, "I use Mint."
I don't have the Facebook Live up, so I don't know if people are commenting. You need something else, Josh. It blows. And the reason why is because you can't really plan anything out in Mint. You just kind of get a static picture of what your debt is or what your income and expenses are. Right. But there's really no month-to-month planning. Where in EveryDollar, you can say, okay, go to November, and it'll say, would you like me to copy over the last month, or would you like to start over? So if you have a variable income, that's kind of a handy tool. You can change it on the fly, or you can use the structure from the last month. And what you were saying, Nathan, when you're tracking debt, and this is what I do as well, is it has a debt sidebar where you can put all of your debt in, and you can track your progress over the last few months, and it'll have different goals that you can hit, and it'll have like the big bubble, kind of like you fill in the little circle on the fridge, when you get up to the top 100% or whatever. But the other ones that I think suck too are You Need a Budget. So that one's $50 a year, and that has a really popular community. They do a lot of cool whiteboard stuff, a lot of financial teaching. I like the teaching, but the app isn't very intuitive. So basically, you have to start out fresh. If you import your money, and let's say you have like $4,000 in savings, it'll add that in there, and you got to place it somewhere, and it's just not very user friendly. And the last one is Excel Online. So Excel Online has a lot of free budgeting templates, but again, not intuitive, doesn't link to bank accounts. So EveryDollar for me is my recommendation.
All right.
Sorry, Josh.
So now that we've made fun of Josh for using Mint, we can all make fun of me because I use one of the ones that you also said sucks. No, my wife and I use You Need a Budget, YNAB.
Okay.
And it works great for us. We kind of do a kind of a hybrid option, because there's the desktop. It's not an app. It's a web app or a browser app. But then it can also sync to iOS and Android apps. So my wife doesn't have the app on her phone. The experience just didn't show her what she needed to see top line, and so we actually have a shared note on iOS that I update with just kind of the top level figures. Here's what we have in groceries. Here's what we have, for clothing or for food or whatever. And so then that syncs to her phone. And so she knows that when the Notes app is updated, that's the most recent changes. And so I kind of manage that all on my end, and then we kind of do like a hybrid version that syncs via iOS Notes. Ultimately the kind of the trick is for everyone is to find something that works for you and your family. Like YNAB works for us, but the mobile app doesn't. Some people have great success with it. It just didn't work for my wife and I, and so we kind of have a hybrid version of what works for us. So we use YNAB, but we don't use all of its features. I use the mobile app, but she doesn't. And so how can you, and especially if you're married, how can you and your spouse, have a system that works? So yeah, I use YNAB and have used it for a long time, and we really like it. But yeah, it's gotten they went through some changes over the years, and then it got worse for a while, and then it got better. I actually didn't like it. Used to have an actual app on my Mac that they went, and when they went to the browser only version, and didn't have the app anymore, I really didn't like it at first. But then they've made incremental improvements, and I really, it's gotten a lot better, and so the kind of just had to go through some growing pains there. But yeah, so that's what we use.
Yeah, I ultimately you're right, Jeremiah. Whatever works for you. The honest answer is only 30% of people in America use a month-to-month budget. So if YNAB is going to get you to do monthly budgets, use it. If Excel Online is going to do it, great. If a paper and pencil is what works, awesome. I have a preference in EveryDollar because it's something I can hand to a client and say, this is very simple to fill out.
Right. Yeah.
And they track with it. YNAB for me, and it might be a knowledge thing. I might not know it well enough. There might be a learning curve that I just haven't got to yet, because the community is strong. People really love it.
Yeah.
But for me, if I hand YNAB to a client who's never budgeted before, I think they're going to have some troubles. But if that works for you, even if Mint works for you, even though I think it sucks, use it. Like, as long as you're budgeting and tracking your income and you know how much extra money you have every month to throw towards debt or investing or college or knocking out your mortgage early or whatever, fantastic. But the honest answer is 70% of people don't budget in America, which is why 75% of us live check to check. A very strong correlation there. And causation from lack of budgeting leading to living check to check. So whatever you do with your budget, if you can stick to it, great. And if that's a system that you have and it's on lock, do it. But if you're just looking to start, I recommend EveryDollar. But as Jeremiah said, YNAB works for people. Mint might work for people. So who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and I actually, when we first got married, I used an Excel spreadsheet, and I was pretty geeky with it, and I enjoyed the spreadsheet aspect of it more than I did the actual budgeting aspect of it, and I had all my little tweaks. But it got to a point where, and it worked really well when I was in college and had minimal income. But as we grew and as a family and extra expenses and different things like that, I found it really hard to keep up with and to make sure that my spreadsheet matched what was in our account and all the the categories were updated and stuff like that. And so, having tried several of the things, tried EveryDollar, tried Mint, tried YNAB, like I said, we fell on YNAB, but if you're out there looking for something, I'd encourage you to try a couple different things and find what clicks with you, because we all kind of learn in a different way, and we all kind of want to experience it in a way that fits us. So good thoughts on that. Josh Armstrong says that Rob should see the update on Mint, and so he's doubling down on that. He's not backing down. So
That I haven't seen it in over a year, so it might be good. It might. I doubt it, but it might be. Just because I know them, I know where they make their money, and it's not on Mint. So there's no reason to invest in it. The one thing I was going to mention, you mentioned Excel spreadsheets. When we first got married, I'm a big Excel guy, Excel developer. So I put together this rocking like 5-tab super linked formula spreadsheet.
Yes.
And it had like net percentages for income and expense categories, and you just type the number in and auto calculated everything. So I showed my wife, and she's like, "What in the hell is this?" Like this, like it changed colors when the account balance was negative automatically, and I just remember being like, "This is complicated. What is this?" So I'll find something else. There's 20 hours of development down the drain.
I did the same thing when we first got married. I was like, all right, you get $32 for clothes. And she's like, you're stupid. You realize we have children and need clothes. It's like, no, $32 is what the formula says. You don't get any more. And our eating out budget is $19.52. She's like, what are we doing? Going to McDonald's like once?
Yeah,
Like
that hot now just closed up, so it has to stretch.
I know. Yeah, there's definitely, you got a budget, but you also have to communicate effectively to your spouse.
yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
So on that note, with no further questions in the Facebook Live, we're going to move on. What do we got next, Nathan?
Sorry, I just wanted to make that awkward. We are going to show Jeremiah's face. There you go. Look at Jeremiah's face
All right, so
as we talk about Strikeforce Energy. StrikeForceEnergy.com. Just look at that glow. Look at that hair. Look at that. Strikeforce Energy. You know what? He wouldn't have that glow, nor would he have that shiny hair if it was not for StrikeForceEnergy.com. Not only does it boost your energy with vitamin B complexes or whatever the heck they put in it, but it also improves your skin color, improves your hair, and I don't know, whatever.
I've heard that President Trump uses the orange flavor, which explains his complexion.
I don't know if that's a positive.
Listen,
or
we
not.
touched on this earlier. It is clear.
I know, but the flavor. That's why it's so powerful.
So little known fact. Before I got hooked on Strikeforce Energy, I was actually bald. So if you want luscious locks like these,
bald, single, and couldn't have children.
it's true. And now I'm married, happily married. We've got our budgeting game on point, and luscious locks of hair and 4 kids. So the results speak for themselves.
Yeah.
I've also heard that Strikeforce Energy has built-in identity theft protection. So check it out, strikeforceenergy.com. Use coupon code MAP for 20% off all of your orders. And definitely we would encourage you to try it out, support the show, support our sponsors, as well as if you are not a part of our exclusive Facebook discussion group, you can go to moneypowerpod.com/group. That will link you to the Facebook discussion group, and we'll add you in there. Just request it, we'll add you. And like I said, the offer still stands. First person to mention that they came here from the show, and I will make sure that you get a Strikeforce Energy sample pack from StrikeforceEnergy.com.
StrikeForceEnergy.com.
It's not exclusive like Trump's Country Club Mar-a-Lago exclusive. It's just exclusive in that you just have to click a button to join. Everyone's welcome.
As long as you're not trying to sell like sunglasses or something shady.
Or
Or
MLMs.
yourself.
Yeah, that is.
If you,
that's
if you
true.
come in there and try and sell an MLM, I will digitally rip your throat out.
Yes.
Digitally rip your throat out.
Just saying.
All right. So is there anything else? No.
No, I think it's time for parting shots, Nathan.
All right. Let's do it. Parting
Wait,
shots.
I thought we were doing Mount Rushmore. We're not doing that?
Oh, well, I didn't prepare for that, so if you
Okay.
guys wanna hit that up, more power to you.
Let's just use Elton John for all 4 categories and move on to parting shots. Nathan likes
Candle
that.
in the wind. All right.
No,
Parting
Nathan's a
shots.
Willie Nelson guy.
Oh, beautiful sound effects, Nathan.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do. Jeremiah.
Yeah, I feel bad for the people on the Facebook Live who have maybe never heard of this podcast and they're just watching for the first time. And they're like, what was that? It's like, just listen to the show. You'll understand. Our soundboard's not working. Nathan's, throwing in his sound effects. It's all good. It's all good. Listen to the show. It is 72% better.
It's all right.
But for my parting shot of the evening, and actually, I didn't have a parting shot until Rob just mentioned multi-level marketing, and it reminded me. There is a new podcast. It is called The Dream, and they're 3 episodes in, but it's kind of got like a true crime flavor to it, just kind of the reporting and the thematic elements. It's kind of like a true crime podcast, but it's all about kind of the history of multi-level marketing, and actually how they're not a new phenomenon, and go back to the door-to-door salesman days, when door-to-door salesmen started to kind of grow out of favor, and hey, maybe it's not the best idea to send some random strange dude to knock on your door and sell vacuum cleaners. They started getting stay-at-home women to sell products to other women and to other families, because they trusted them and would allow them into their homes and not be some random strange dude knocking on the door. Anyway, so it's really interesting, and they go into. I don't know how deep they're going to go. It's only they just released episode 3, I think, today, so I've only heard the first 2 episodes. But I'm really enjoying it, and you may, if you're a fan of multi-level marketing, companies, you may come out at the end hating them. If you already hate them, you might come out and be a little bit more understanding. I don't know. We'll see how the series goes. But I like it. It's called The Dream. It's available everywhere podcasts are found, I'm assuming. And yeah, check it out. The Dream. It's all about MLMs.
All right, Rob.
I got nothing.
Sweet. All right. I just want to touch on the as the Kavanaugh turns. And just say that America.
I told you not to.
I know, but I couldn't do it. Is this I'm just going to say this. America, on both sides, I think we can do better.
Yeah.
I think we can do better. Just our discourse around it. Like, 2 things can be true at once. We can think that sexual assault is a really bad thing and should not ever happen to any woman, ever.
Or
And also, or man, fine.
Wow.
just saying, bro.
We'll go in universal with it. Anyways,
Keeping it equal.
humankind, nobody should be sexually assaulted. Just thanks. And also can be true that we have a presumption of innocence that if a claim is made, there has to be some evidence to back it up. And that's very important. And we on this podcast have put that standard in place for our police officers when it comes to, killing people. And, a presumption of innocence is pretty important there as well. And we've also instituted that in this case. And, it's just, man, I think our discourse could just be a lot better. But of course, that's why we have this podcast. So,
to be honest, at this point, I'm just so over the whole situation. I'm sick of hearing about it. It's one of the reasons I was like, can we please not talk about this in news bits?
Yep.
It's just I'm over it. A lot of the people that are in my circles are the same way. Like people on the left, people on the right, they're just sick of hearing about it. And at this point, it's just like whatever happens, just let it happen, and can we please just be over it and move on to the next. Whatever the next thing is that we as a culture are outraged about next week.
Exactly.
It's 50. Yeah, it's literally 50% of my news feed. I do have a parting shot now.
All right, outstanding, Rob.
So we talked about finance. One thing I wanted to reiterate. So if this is for everyone. So if you're a teenager, you're listening to the show. Wow. That's awesome. I don't know why, but if you happen to be, or a parent, college education is something that we put a lot of emphasis on. I'm not sure why. There's reasons, there's justifications for certain degrees, but honestly, college is not for everyone. You can be successful without college. I had a conversation this weekend with a dude, didn't go to school. He's knocking down like $150K a year, and he's just worked hard his entire life. And him and I had a conversation about school because he found out I had my MBA, and he's like, well, why? So we had a good discussion, and we had two different perspectives on the value of education. And ultimately he's right. It's about how hard you're willing to work, and can you justify the degree that you have. So school is not for everyone. I know that has very little to do with what we talked about, but financially, I think it makes a good point to really think about what you're going to do in your 20s and why you're going to do it.
Absolutely.
That's good stuff.
Boom. All right. So any other comments we got here? Checking.
So I would just like to say, if you want to reach out to us, you can follow us on all social media channels at Money Power Pod. Really appreciate those who joined us at Money Power Pod on Facebook for the Facebook Live. If you are listening to this in podcast form, thanks for listening. We really appreciate it. For feedback, you can hit us up on the socials, or you can hit us up at info@moneypowerpod.com. Shoot us an email, shoot us a voice memo. We'll play it on the show. And also, if you would like information on our podcast network, the Money and Power Podcast Network, you can go to moneypowerpod.com/network and find out information about how to apply and join our podcast network if you would like, how to start a podcast if you would like. We would love to have you. So hit us up on social, send us an email, join the network. We really appreciate all the support, and we really appreciate everyone who joined us for the Facebook Live.
Absolutely. And
today's the official launch date of the network, October 1st, Q4.
Boom.
So,
that's right.
Yep.
And how many days till Christmas? Actually, the question is, how many days until Jeremiah puts up his Christmas tree? And I have the over-under at 6.
6 days. That's.
I'll take the over.
Okay. Well, I won't make any comments then. We'll just see who wins that bet.
Yep.
All right.
So for Jeremiah Martin, for Rob Johnson, I am Nathan Martin saying good night and good luck. And thanks for joining us on Facebook.
Only 85 days till Christmas. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Happy holidays.